Hello all. I don't know why it put my Rarity as the Rarity logo I have on my YouTube thingy as the channel image. YouTube is being weird. You guys build an AI to build the system for you, and then you have no idea which in the AI, and you need to pull to change the thing, and you need a coding team of 1,000 to get any kind of minor change into your system. You're like, whoa, it works, it makes us money. We have no idea how or why or what else it's doing, but at least it's making us money. That being said, yes, it's very obvious to me. That being said, this will most likely be my last, at least I hope I may make one in a year, perhaps, but last inebriated stream. As some of you may be aware, yesterday I linked or made one of these podcasts where I linked, far as I remember, the page of the local Finnish collection agency, debt collection agency. And they, for some reason, changed their stance from me owing them 7,000 to me only owing them $57 and around 90 cents. I have no idea why. I searched through the information and there was no, far as I could tell, thing stating that I am no longer indebted to them. The last note was from September, as in this month, I think 15th to 20th, where they canceled yet another 1,000 because it was like a 10-year-old debt and they don't collect beyond a certain date. They allow your credit to restore. But there was no mention of the actual 7,000. And I did some work in the Astral to try to figure it out, but I could get no clear signal as to why this is the case now. So long story short, it looks like the state of Finland covered all my debts and don't want it mentioned. Because if you, as a private citizen, take a loan from another private citizen, and the private citizen who you take the loan from takes the matter to court because you didn't pay, and the court, as in the government, says that you are not obligated to pay, this will reduce the country in question's or court in question's credit rating, because you are saying that in these cases you side with the debtee, I think. So the only way to do this and maintain what in Finland is a very high credit rating for the government, far as I can tell in the Astral, is to pay the debts manually and then report to the debtee that the debts are no longer being collected. I don't know how they do this, but they are doing something. It is also the only way to make sure that the government is interested in the matters of the low debt rating people, credit rating people. Because lowering interest rates for everyone becomes smart for the government, which means that interest rate will be low, inflation will also be low, and there will be some amount of economic growth while population is either stable or declining, which is good. It's very good. So it's looking like, thanks to the fact that the debts are paid, that I can now contact the rentals in this city and actually get a rental. And it looks like with my credit rating now effectively restored, getting a rental is damn easy once you have credit rating. But if you do not have credit rating, it is virtually impossible. You may be able to get it through friends or contacts, but without those, you are fucked. As in, if you're homeless, you're fucked. So it looks like in a few weeks to a few months, I will have my own rental place, and I will still be getting enough income in my pension that I am going to be survivable. However, While this place is for recovering junkies, addicts, homeless people, mental insane, disabled, etc., the official rules of this place and what actually people do are two completely different matters. So, in a place like this, despite rules stating that you cannot smoke in your own apartment, and you know that about 80 to 90% of the people here smoke something, and there are perhaps 5 people who are always the same 5 people in the public smoking place. And every apartment I have visited here, such as it can be said, seems to smell of tobacco or have some related Aperol visible. So, my opinion is that while it is possible to smoke in a place like this and not be busted, if you go into a private rental place and you have anything resembling class in your rental, you will not be able to smoke because it will be harshly punished. This is what happened last time I was in a rental. The neighbors started occasionally ringing my doorbell and saying that they smelled smoke. I had many interesting things in my life moving on. So that means that what you are seeing here, based on the fact that starting tomorrow, I'm going to try to stop smoking everything. It will be hellish and I will be in agony, but I believe it need to be done at this juncture. So this is the last time that you have a chance to see and participate in this persona's actions. Once the chemicals needed to support this persona are gone, this persona will slowly demanifest itself. It will break it apart. So this is your last good chance to participate in this persona, so please take the opportunity. And as you can see, I'm full screen instead of the tiny box in the corner. And I am going to be listening to music and my own artwork, so I'm risking a YouTube strike. But I hope that by keeping this full screen, it will be possible to avoid the harshness of the censorship. But I am unsure if that is the case. I believe if I do this, it will remain the same view to you. Yes, it will. So I'm going to be holding one screen at the one and another at the other, and it will be good. So, on to good news, or better news. I consider it pretty good news that my debts have been settled. I now owe a single doctor's appointment note and of all the payments that are still visible, and it's for a total of 57 euros and around 90 cents. That is the only one that they did not cancel. And due to the advice of my debt guy, I'm not going to be paying it immediately. I will be checking if the debt stated as not being payable due to me being poor will remain not payable. Because if they then start to collect, because I'm now on my feet, the earlier debts, then fuck them all, because then there's at least 25,000 in there. And that I won't be able to pay. And I loaned 4,000. Actually, a little less than 4,000 if I recall, but around that. So that's your, credit rating. But on the good news, better news, more good news. Now that the debts seem to be indeed settled, it looks not only likely, but in fact probable that I will be able to order at least one iteration of the simulation. I have been thinking of how to program this well, because I cannot do the programming, I can do the programmers. So how to program this well. I believe the first one will be the guy I looked at previously, who makes these games on Unity. and sends you the source code and so on and so forth. From what I can gather, he works with a very small team, but says he's alone, from what I can gather from the speed of his work. And they all work around 16 hours a day, and they are making double what the national average is. That is a lot of money for somebody working freelance online on a new service. That is a lot of money. So he will charge around 140 to 170 euros, if I recall, for the one game, and he will spend 3 or 4 days at the rate, which means that I'll get around 3 weeks of, I think, professional work hours, so I can budget what I ask for that. Making something like a side-scroller shooter game that some of these YouTube videos have been showing takes around an hour to make. Making a complex simulator with a lot of variables with interconnection and ability to change those variables, resulting in outcomes that are across 100 turns on the same simulator or so, even 20, is another beast entirely. So we will see what the first one manages to produce. If I like his art style, his animation, his work in general, I will order the second one from him. If not, I will find somebody who can use his source code, which he will also provide, and do better. And then I will see what they do. And I will keep switching producers, or rather designers, until I find the right designer, the right guy to make this. And as I've said, everybody who participates in the demo testing phase can get their name in the credits. I'm not charging anything. This is not a event that requires money. This is one where I will be doing the money and you will be doing the enjoyment, this type of event. And I'm budgeting this game for, from now to actual release, where it is available to purchase on a service such as Steam, something that people actually use, to around 9 months to a year at the lowball estimate. And I'm going to be aiming for a maximum of 1,000, but I will probably overshoot that. Finances are not my strong point. But first alpha should be out by Christmas. First alpha. That will be free, and you will only be asked to participate in our forum and submit a bug review, what need be changed. Once you do that, if we consider your bug report worthwhile, that alone will get your name in the credits, barring there being 100 million bug reports, at which point we'll lift our hands up and just say, well, that was sudden. If we sell 200 to 500 copies a year at €3 a pop, of which we get half and half goes to taxes and other stuff, we will be considering this a job well done. It will be extraordinarily well done. Because then I have a quick way to make cheap games from almost any topic, because if they can make this, they can make almost any topic. This is complex enough. For a few hundred, make around 1,000 and call it a day. Then I will make 100 of these small games, and I will polish them and make them complete products instead of buggy stuff with lots of features missing, because that is my development plan for the first one. I want it to be complex enough where I can show it on my stream and go like, this is the data set that I'm using. It's available here. And that will be the end of it. That will be the complete product. The alpha will probably have something along the lines of two of around a dozen to half a dozen key features missing due to them being too complex to implement at that time. But I hope that it will have the multiple card political system, environmental data, and some way to change it. But we are looking for things like multiple endings, which we may not be able to program at this time. You will just get the ending and your credits, like what points you got, and that'll be it. And a lot of these might be very simplistic early versions because this is an alpha, with a notice that once we get the next version, we're already planning to implement these. So, and I believe I will need to order this 3 or 4 times for it to be the complete product, but that seems to be in the ballpark. And it should be the, let's call it, German, Italian, Russian version of the simulator, while the current is clearly the UK and the environmental faction. There are so many, so glaring faults that I could spend hours and hours discussing it, but I will leave it at this. If you do not ban any single energy source, but your entire planet has done every single green reformation possible and is completely aligned with the Green Party, your CO2 production will still increase. That is absolute bullshit, because it makes the game about picking when you can make the energy system bans, which is not good. There are 9 points on the slider between the most capitalist and the most environmental, I think. And I think in my game, we will have something along the lines of 5 to 7. But when you are at most the second greenest option, your CO2 production, even if your economy grows, will be going down, as is the case in many of these countries under the Kyoto. The economic growth remains. There is an adjustment period where it fluctuates, but once the market stabilizes to your new choice, economic growth will remain, but CO2 will be going down. It will, however, take a moment when your market stabilizes. It will find where the money can be acquired. What is the best way to spend money simply to reduce whole society CO2 production? Everybody give us an idea, and then they talk, and they compress the talk list to say 100 key points, which they from Parliament give to the Senate, and then they talk. We have from the people, the Parliament, who have no power in and of themselves except to make these very specific suggestion lists, and then refuse to make any list if we don't follow at least some of their suggestions. And we have found these lists to be absolutely vital to our whole effort. And in this list, they have compiled methods and costs of carbon reduction with like anecdotes on each one. And they present it to us as such without any note on it. And then the government goes like, if we go CO negative at this ratio, we get this much from the common market because we're producing less CO2 that we can sell to CO2 producers for money. These are called credits. So if we go like this, the money will cover it to be going like this. And so on and so forth. And the more economies that join it, the better it will be for us. I would, were I China, instantly join the Kyoto. I would simply get the 100 poorest countries and buy their CO2 production for solar panels and wind turbines. Then I would source them to Chinese companies to produce more wind turbines and solar panels. So your country is going to build one coal at 100 million, produce 100 megawatt hours. We will produce you 80 megawatt hours of green energy at a minimum constant. It may peak at 200 when it's very sunny or when it is something that the system uses. If it's dams, very rainy, for example, but it will have a constant output of 80. We will get 80 of your megawatt hours as green energy, and we will, because we have a lot of coal, produce the coal power plant and make it very green and efficient. But we will use your 80 to produce something like 500 domestically, and use the 200 from the 500 to produce the wind turbines and solar panels for your 200. You needn't do nothing. We will do this for free. We are just doing this because we need those credits. And then I would purchase the poor parts of the planet in a year to a green economy and give the Chinese economy time to subsidize away from coal one more year, because they are doing it. They just require some time for it. You get a year. If you continue to be the most afforestationing, as in growing more forest nation on the planet, we won't complain as much, but we will complain because it is our job to complain. But we will take note. Because you are growing forest, I believe, at a higher rate than anybody else of the large nations. You got it. Good. I believe last 5-year average was around 400 to 600,000 hectares of forest growth per year. Still not much, but it's something. That's good. Anybody doing better than that is excellent, because that is defining the bar of good. It can't be excellent if the planet is cooking because nobody's doing enough. It can only be good. If you're going better than the largest nation towards the outcome of improving it, you're doing excellent. That is the only definition of excellent. Were you more powerful, you would be doing the definition and there might not be the crisis. So you're doing excellent. You're one of the guiders. A lot of these countries that are currently doing coal expansion don't realize how expensive coal might get very suddenly. And those countries doing the expansion of renewables are kind of getting that the sun and the wind are going to be around for a while. I mean, it's hard to find a dystopian future where wind and sunshine in some form doesn't exist. At least both at the same time. It's very hard to find such a dystopia. And since we're already pumping, I believe, a little over 95% of our renewable energy battery is in the form of pumping renewable energy upstream from a dam system, as in storing energy kinetically. It's already at around 95%, so you can't do much better than that. You have solved the question of which energy system to use to store the energy. Anybody else is just wasting chemicals. The best way to do this now is to find suitable locations close enough to either sunshine or wind or geothermal with a dam. Geothermal is pretty stable on its own, so it might be usable as a dam of sorts. But I'm just putting it out there. And pumping when the price is low upstream and selling when it is high downstream. Then finding river sites into which those riverside turbines, which take energy from the curvature, I suppose, of the water surface itself, those are pretty darn good. And then gently wait for the third generation biofuels, gently. We are at current research, development, investment, going from 244 or 5 years ago to around 7.5 to 5 currently. It's full biofuels without making note of which source, just biofuels, and then we can compress what we define as biofuels are at around 2.5 gallon, while normal unleaded good quality petroleum is around 1.7. It's very close, but it's going down very rapidly while the price of oil has been historically at a slight rise. There are peaks and valleys, but it has been at a slight rise. This one has been going against inflation at a very rapid rate. Now, if it hits the same with petroleum, I will have the wildest party this planet has ever seen. I will do something. I might even do cocaine, but I doubt it. I will do something. Something that will be worth something, because it will be a glorious day. Then it will be cheaper and more efficient to take anything that produces CO2 in a gaseous state into the environment, such as a coal plant horn thing, and put a nostril to the side and just suck up the CO2 from the thing and convert that to biofuel through the algae process, which is the most efficient of per square meter of the biofuels. So technically, you can retain production in those coal fire plants that you have, as long as you build a correspondingly large CO2 capture device next to it. And if you capture it from algae to oil, when the price of oil from algae drops from around 3 to 7 per gallon versus petroleum's 1.3 to around 2.5 per gallon, depending on region. Once you do that, all your CO2 production will in fact be cheapest just to keep as such and produce oil, which will lower the need for the oil fields that produce what I call rock petroleum, because it's from geothermal or earth doing something to something. It's from the ground. It's rock petroleum. Anywhere where that is evident, then you will find oil. Because it's doing something wrongly to the ground. It produces oil. It liquefies. You have a dirt topsoil 10 kilometers deep, and you know that when the ground starts to shake in any mass, the rocks like lift to the surface, and you have pockets that have constant grinding motion in them, geothermal energy into them, and they shake. And you know that the lighter mass gets to the bottom and the heavier mass gets to the top. Eventually, the lighter is so light that it turns into oil when it's compressed, because it's just oil. The larger boulders will still remain large boulders. It's very hard to break down a large boulder for anything. But the soft part will liquefy and liquefy and liquefy until its density lowers in the liquefied area low enough for it to turn into basically geogas. Which then, if you continue to compress the space because there's a mountain building on top, turns to oil. And then, large algae fields, such as the primordial ocean, turned into specifically methane chloride. That's its technical name. Forests and mass on land turned into oil. That's what we see. If it's straight at a region where the continental plates are missing, where there is just the ocean floor itself, and it has retained that characteristic throughout its evolution, because you can see the nature of it or something along those lines. And you will get methane chloride. It's the organic goo of the ocean sinking to the floor in the same spot for a billion years. Those pockets, according to the Fate game, which I like to correct on many things, which I haven't checked, but according to that particular source, it's around 65 million terawatt hours in methane chloride. Still too difficult and expensive to mine for energy purposes, but we're getting there. We're getting there. A lot of these theoretical research things can be done pretty cheap, but they have to be done by somebody. If you just get somebody who's like a scientific leader and they just get like, we have 1.5% budget excess because of this thing, and we have this long list of research topics that might benefit from more funding. And then the leader just goes, cancer research, building this thing to simulate this thing, or making this medicine to simulate this, or so and so and so, because it has to be research, has to be simulated. You can make it with a double-blind study with humans, but it's still pretty much a simulation because it's so controlled. But yes, research. And the leader just goes, I have this much, and just that one, that one, that one, that one. Yeah, end up with the Victorian era, when the rate of technological development was slightly faster than today. If you're looking for the period in time when the world changed the most, you gotta think Victorian. After the dominance of the horse, the age of the horse, for perhaps 5,000 years, humans began to dominate. We finally built a machine which made the largest and most tamed animal useless for anything except niche purposes. You can have them if you live in the countryside or such, but for anything resembling common, I'm gonna have an engine. That's the change. That's Victorian era. That's when the world changed the most that I have seen in a short period of time. In a 2-3 decade period after the UK got the steam engine and railroad system working first, in that particular 30-year period, which wasn't the height of the Victorian era in as much because they benefited from mostly later, but during that period when they were building the stuff because they had the stuff to build the stuff with, their CO2 production was something along the lines of 20 times the second competitor. That's how far we got. Then France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany started to get their CO2 production up as well. And then it stabilized into a multipolar system where everybody had enough space to expand into and nobody was constricted for anything. That lasted for around 150 years. Nobody was, during the Victorian era, truly poor. This was the period when, for example, America waged its civil war to disband slavery and such. Didn't completely work because wars never solve anything completely. But compared to the slave trade across the Atlantic and 1,000 crowned spaceships of sorts a year to the current system, you're seeing something else. After a fashion, it worked kinda. Stopped colonizing, took some effort, had some downsides. We became very interested in our government affairs. Had some leaders who exemplified being particularly interested in government affairs. Some of the German chancellors spring to mind. After we decided that colonizing was a poor idea. I mean, you can do it, but it's a poor idea. It's much better to go to the native territory, which at this point is endless. You can always find natives during the Victorian era. And simply go to the region that's kind of aware of westernization but hasn't been westernized, and provide them with massive amounts of something needed in the process of westernization, but not the whole package. And just go, can you cough up some dough? If you can't, can I take ownership of that particular group of people that work for this thing? And like in a few moments, you'd have your own empire. Belgium did that with the Congo very badly, but they are one of the historical examples. They were kind of brutal. But colonization is so brutal as a process, even amongst the best of it, that it was decided not to be done. Happened during the Victorian era, actually. There was this thing called the Race for Africa. That was after the steam engine had been developed and every other continent had some sort of like industrial process going on. You had actual factories showing up, and Africa was still empty because nobody like really wanted to go there. We knew the locals didn't want us there, so we didn't go there. It was kind of different when you find something that's like, yeah, you can build a port there type place, you know. So once we got the good steam engine, everybody like took slices of Africa at the same time, divided into domains. We held that until the 1880s. Then we decided that it's probably a bad idea, and then we started disbanding it. Disbanded finally in the 1965, I think, or so. That's when the last region that could be considered a colony in that sense, anywhere away from your like primary core, is filled with a nation. That's why everybody loses something. We all feel we are compressed into a tiny space. That's on purpose. That was done then. People before that had no concept of that. We just gotta hope these random changes to our DNA produce something nice, or otherwise we're fucked. If it's not good for the rest of us, then it's not good for any of us. That's what the animal kingdom is looking at. I got stiff opposition, but I got far, far more support than I ever thought I could get for my idea of, instead of farming cattle specifically, we reduce the number of cattle that we farm to its absolute minimum. Beef will be sold, but it will be expensive, and so on and so forth. And every other effort is made to find every species that we categorize as the least threatened, which means the most common, and farm it for food, which would start literally with taking every form of animal found in a city, such as a rat, and turning it into either primary or secondary biofuel, because third uses algae. Primary is being fed to population, secondary is being fed to the incinerator, if you will. And we will use that. We will push all life starting from our center point, from the most common, one step down in the 7-point ladder that the UN has. And we will find every form of life that is in the least common 3 categories and try to make them more common. We have proposed that, and I believe it's going to be overruled. I believe it's not going to be undertaken, but the discussion has been virile. And currently, the support for it, while smaller than the opposition for it, has been far stronger than I ever could have thought, especially among the kinds that would be affected negatively in that. They have actually said that in terms of population demand, that would not be unfeasible. It would, in fact, in some ways be good. Most opposition has come from the largest biomass centralization points, where the mass is equal to each other across the entire biomass. Most opposition has come from those. The idea would be, because cattle is so dominant, that you shouldn't eat it so much. You can still eat it, but not so much. And that would reduce the amount of cattle being farmed and improve the conditions, because if your cost towards selling it is 20 instead of 5, and your cost towards producing it at the current demand level and environmental structures is, if you produce it at $5, $1.50. If you produce it at $20, let's say $3. You look at all the improvements that have been for capita proposed for your animals and see if they push you high enough where your profits are, compared to the previous system, still acceptably higher, but that the overall quality of your product has improved. This would cause massive changes to the system. It would be massively proficient. It would make farmers unfucking believably rich who farm these animals. They would also lessen in supply, but the remaining ones would be very rich. Very rich. Because this change is not a change in the lifestyle of the animal. Because if we do that, they will not be much richer. They will not do the outright there. But if this is specifically for an ideological human-wide reason, then the secondary change will be that they will be unbelievably rich. They will not be overworked anymore. Mm-hmm. Ihan selvästi. Come on. Come on. The change of this would be that things like algae, which are very common but very underused, things like vermins and pests and things we consider disease would be turned into food. This would be the primary result. If you imagine the human being's surface skin, currently we are using around 5 species to form a human, because, cat, cow, disease, whatever. But there are around 5 that we primarily use. That would result in a system where you get hundreds of different species for food, but most of them would be seasonal, if you will. Their prices would be such that it would be profitable for you not to focus on a single item, is the outcome. That is how it's designed. It's probably going to be overruled, like I said. I've been following it, but the support has been far more numerous than I ever could have imagined for such a thing. If we do so, we will naturally start with the UN core personnel adopting the philosophy first. Naturally. As far as I understand, such proposals are UN material. As far as you understand them, you have control over them. As far as I understand. It's designed to be a certain instructional guideline corporation on how to publicly defend yourself against somebody trying to exterminate you. What are your rights under their law? Pretty wide, because the membership is nations and the objective is to move you between them. Pretty wide. They can do pretty amazing stuff at that level. You know the moment when I first really doubted my belief in the EU? You want to know? When I realized during my little escapade with the state during the hunger strike thing, that if I escape to Sweden, which I believe is a EU member, I cannot legally apply for asylum. They are obligated by the EU to return me. I was kind of like, I know that they can make an exception, but the norm is that if it's a national born to a national in another country that's in the EU, it can't apply for asylum in another nation, I believe. This is, in my opinion, very problematic as a policy. If it's to retain its concept of nationhood, the certainty that the population can freely escape what they consider prejudice and call it so publicly from another nation must be upheld. There must be regional variants. If not, then you are doing something beyond belief bad. I'm asking, is this like Belgium's attempt to do Congo of Europe? Because that's what it's looking like. If I'm mad at the EU, then I'm mad at Belgium specifically, which was a astonishingly smart move once again from the black-haired little woman spirit. Astonishingly smart move. Androsense migration start control 2. Dogs. Teidän. Onpas vaan välikäs.
Rehellisesti, tupakoinnin lopettaminen on vaikeaa, joten aloita pienin askelin.
The 17th century was a period of unrest, war, and revolution throughout the world. The 30 Years' War left Europe devastated, causing the death of millions via war, hunger, or disease. The largest state in Europe, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, went through one of the worst events in its history, the Deluge. The first global empire of the world, and arguably the most powerful European state of the 16th century, Spain, was on the decline, losing some of the territories belonging to the crown. Britain saw a series of revolutions and rebellions in England, Scotland, Ireland, and even its American colonies. Russia and France were going through internal unrest too. The monarch of England was executed after a revolution, while the Ottoman Sultan was killed after a military coup. The most populous state of the world, China, had become ground for a bloody civil war, leading to the collapse of the Ming dynasty. The Mughal Empire, one of the richest countries of the world, also experienced a civil war, leading to the killing and imprisonment of its former rulers. While these events do not seem interconnected, as they have happened in different parts of the world for seemingly unrelated reasons, some historians view these events of the 17th century as the general crisis of humankind. In this episode, we're going to view the events of the 17th century through the lens of the theory of general crisis. You know what a modern crisis looks like? The fact that hackers want to steal your data and money, the ISPs are snooping into your between these sites in Europe. Indeed, other historians have made similar claims that the 17th century was the period of the birth of global modernity. The Renaissance and Reformation of the previous century had a powerful long-term impact on the masses, especially the new rising bourgeoisie, which sought more power, and power in Europe was shifting to the increasingly capitalist northern countries like the Netherlands and England at the expense of Spain. The 17th century became the period of the birth of global modernity, as Europe was transitioning from feudalism to capitalism, from agrarian economy to industrialization. In that sense, the general crisis of the 17th century was transformational in nature. Hobsbawm argued that the 17th century was the key moment in history, as England became the world's first bourgeois society. Initially, the general crisis theory was Eurocentric in nature, but British historian Geoffrey Parker added additional elements to this theory. He described similar chaotic events outside of Europe in the same period, and made the crisis theory truly global, while arguing that the Little Ice Age, the short-term climate change coinciding with the 17th century, was a common reason for boosting momentous societal events of the century. Let us look at the events of the 17th century to understand why historians have called its events the general crisis. First of all, the 17th century witnessed almost non-stop war in Europe. The 30 Years' War raged between 1618 and 1648, and involved virtually all major European powers of the time. But even beyond that, different conflicts took place in Europe. In the 6 decades between 1618 to 1678, Poland was at peace for only 27 years, Netherlands for only 14, France for only 11, Spain for only 3. Beyond Europe, the Ottoman Empire had only 6 peaceful years.
we're gonna play everybody's favorite game. We're gonna do one scenario that's almost certainly gonna end in failure. It was proposed. And we're gonna do a couple of normal-ish gameplays. If it looks probable that we'll hit 2 degrees by 2100, we may continue. Let me adjust everything so you can see me. And so on. It's giving me the chibisma. That's my mouse pad. I'm gonna try something that will almost certainly be ending in failure, but it was proposed. Who has the highest HDMI? North America, Oceania, and Japan. So I will take North America. Seems to be fairly stable. Yes. Oh, capital actually needs a different one to do this at the fastest rate. Now that I really think about it. It needeth the one. There we go. Oh, it also needs the capital. F. Once more. Okay. Okay. Come here, okay. Oh, that Duffburnet. And Japan is usually, for some reason, more stable than Oceania. So, and I actually need one more. Okay, so. Kyllä mä oon käytössä. Kling, kling. change my request was specifically against the same meeting. So it's kind of why I'm still excited about this morning. Yet to challenge me might grow. Oh, damn. Well, I'll just have to. Nobody's eligible to pay Edelvin tax. It's 1/10. No, 1/100th of 1% of every transaction we make. That's what we're seeing is viable as a solution in this whole crisis. Oh, damn it. I didn't want the political office on this one. Then I'm probably gonna lose all these regions in the next turn. If the, what's it called, speech of the century option isn't possible. It's a very expensive one that gives you the those support units for the province. My capital region. No. No. It ends in nuclear war. The end. Got the apocalypse. Alpaca. Shit. You may worship me, but I'm not smart. I have no interest in your religious ideology. Why is everybody based on religious ideology? I hereby announce no more than 3 degrees by 2200. I cannot much alter with this simulator your 2100 score. I'm making my own announcement is complete. I am a very small producer, but it is an exceedingly small market. Niche, if you will. You will be getting greens and you will be getting energy bands, but you will not be getting power. You may get fracking band. I'm going to go with most polluting to least polluting, excluding coal, which would be the natural first because we just saw if we use these scores, banning coal earlier will result in planetary wide boom. And I will be doing colonization of Mars in the 2040s at the latest, instead of starting at the 2050s. Tobin, insert environmental and transition. Remove Tobin, insert environmental and transition. Our new guy, transition and cheapest support game. Let's say easiest for me. And we are going to have to attain to one tax in one of these states to ensure the thing. Which Increases growth for poor regions, decreases growth for rich regions. Rich regions will soon be getting a shortening of their work week with the same GDP and less pollution. Less ability to make Tobin tax as well. At some point, that will be no more Tobin tax. Or everybody on the Tobin tax hike will not be used. Russia, you say. Okay, let's remove that one. And solve this one. Decrease the we were at 373 food per month per person, or was it per year per person? I think per year, and we would have had a famine at the next turn. Such is that game. It killed us.